Grace Holloway was tired. She had been tired for 3 years now, ever since the war ended and left her with nothing but bad dreams and a small ship that barely held together. She used to be a combat medic. She used to save lives on burning battlefields while plasma fire screamed over her head. Now she was just a salvager, picking through the bones of dead ships and selling whatever she could find. Her vessel was called the Driftwood. It was an ugly thing, patched together from parts of 6 different ships. The hull was scarred and the engine made sounds that no engine should make. But it flew, and that was enough. In the demilitarized zone between human space and Velthury territory, a ship that flew was worth more than gold. The Velthury. Grace still remembered the first time she saw one of them. It was during the Battle of New Houston, 11 years into the war. The creature stood 8 feet tall with 4 arms and fur the color of thunderclouds. Its eyes were golden and filled with a cold intelligence that made her blood run cold. She watched it tear through a squad of Marines like they were made of paper. Humanity had fought the Velthury for 11 years. Millions died on both sides. Cities burned. Planets fell. And then, just like that, it ended. The diplomats signed papers and shook hands, and everyone went home to pretend that the last decade had not happened. Grace could not pretend. She still saw the faces of the soldiers she could not save. She still heard their screams when she closed her eyes. So she flew alone through the empty spaces between stars and tried not to think too much. The distress signal came through on a Tuesday. Grace was eating cold noodles in the cockpit when the console started beeping. She frowned and checked the readings. The signal was coming from an uncharted moon about 6 hours away. It was weak and broken, repeating the same pattern over and over. She almost ignored it. Distress signals in the demilitarized zone were usually traps. Pirates liked to lure salvagers in and then take everything they had. But something about this signal felt different. It was not a human frequency. It was VLT Hari. Grace sat there for a long time, staring at the blinking light on her console. Every smart part of her brain told her to fly the other way. The Velthury were not her people. They were not her problem. But the medic in her, the part that had never really died, would not let her turn away from someone who might need help. She changed course and flew toward the moon. The moon was small and gray, covered in ash and black stone. There was no atmosphere, so Grace had to put on her suit before she left the ship. She walked across the surface with her boots crunching against the dust. Following the signal to its source. She found the wreckage in a crater. It was a Velthury transport vessel, a big one, torn almost in half. Scorch marks covered the hull. Someone had attacked this ship with serious weapons. Grace climbed through a hole in the side and turned on her flashlight. The inside of the ship was dark and cold. Bodies lay everywhere. Adult Velthury, their gray fur matted with frozen blood. Grace counted 12 of them before she stopped counting. They had died fighting. Weapons were still clutched in their 4-fingered hands. Then she heard the sound. It was soft, almost too quiet to notice. A whimpering like a scared animal. Grace followed the sound deeper into the ship, stepping over debris and dead warriors. She came to a door that had been sealed from the inside. She cut through it with her welding torch and pushed it open. Inside the room, 12 small shapes huddled together in the corner. Grace stopped breathing. They were cubs. Velthury cubs, no bigger than human children. Their fur was lighter than the adults, more silver than gray. Their golden eyes were wide with terror as they stared at her. One of them, the smallest, was crying without making any sound. An old Velthury lay in the center of the room. It was still alive, but barely. Its breathing was shallow and its eyes were dim. When it saw Grace, it tried to rise but could not. Grace knelt beside the elder. She did not know why. These were Velthury. These were the enemy. But the medic in her did not care about enemies. It only cared about the wounded. The elder reached out with one trembling hand and grabbed Grace's arm. It spoke in broken human language, each word costing it tremendous effort. Raiders came. Killed everyone. Only the young remain. Grace looked at the cubs. They were pressed so tightly together that they looked like one creature with many eyes. They were shaking. Please, the elder whispered. They are children of noble clans, important, must survive. Grace did not know what to say. She was one human with a broken ship. She could barely take care of herself. How was she supposed to protect 12 alien children? The elder seemed to sense her doubt. It reached into its robes and pulled out a medallion on a chain. The medallion was old, very old, made of some metal that Grace did not recognize. Strange symbols were carved into its surface. Take this, the elder said. It will explain. The prophecy. You are the one. What prophecy? What are you talking about? But the elder did not answer. Its hand fell away from Grace's arm. Its eyes closed. Its chest stopped moving. Just like that, it was gone. Grace knelt there in the silence, holding the medallion. The cubs watched her. They did not move. They did not speak. They just watched as if they were waiting for something. She should leave. She should walk out of this ship and fly away and forget that any of this ever happened. That was the smart thing to do. That was what any reasonable person would do. Grace stood up and put the medallion around her neck. Then she turned to the cubs and held out her hand. Come on, she said. We are getting out of here. The cubs did not move at first. They just stared at her with those big golden eyes. Then the smallest one, the one who had been crying, took a step forward. It reached out with its small four-fingered hand and touched Grace's palm. The others followed. One by one, they gathered around her, pressing close to her legs and her sides. They were warm, warmer than she expected. Their fur was soft against her suit. Grace led them out of the dead ship and across the gray moon to the driftwood. She helped them inside and sealed the airlock. She gave them blankets and water and watched them huddle together in the cargo bay. Then she went to the cockpit and sat down in her chair and stared at the stars for a very long time. She had no idea what she was doing. She had no idea where to take them or how to keep them safe. She did not even know their names, but she knew one thing. She could not leave them to die. Whatever happened next, whatever the cost, she would protect these children. Grace Holloway started the engine and flew away from the moon, carrying 12 Valkyrie cubs toward an unknown future. Danny Vance was waiting when the driftwood returned to the depot station. He was a big man with gray hair and hands scarred from years of working on ship engines. He had been Grace's partner for 2 years now. They were not friends exactly, but they understood each other. Both of them had lost too much in the war to form easy friendships. Danny was smoking a cigarette near the docking bay when the airlock opened. He watched Grace step out and started to say something about the parts she was supposed to bring back. Then he saw what was behind her. 12 Valkyrie cubs walked down the ramp in a line, their golden eyes blinking in the station lights. They stayed close to Grace, some of them holding onto her jacket, others pressing against her legs. Danny dropped his cigarette. Grace, he said slowly. What did you do? I found them, Grace said. Their ship was attacked. Everyone else is dead. So you brought them here? You brought Valkyrie onto our station? They are children, Danny. They are just children. Danny stared at the cubs. His face was hard. Grace knew why. His younger brother had died during the siege of New Houston. A Valkyrie warrior had killed him. Danny had never talked about it, but Grace had seen the way he looked whenever someone mentioned the war. I cannot do this, Danny said. I cannot be around them. Then go somewhere else. But I am not throwing them out. They stood there looking at each other for a long moment. The cubs watched in silence. They could feel the tension even if they did not understand the words. Finally, Danny let out a long breath. He looked at the cubs again. One of them, a small female with silver-white fur, was holding Grace's hand and staring at him with wide eyes. She did not look like a monster. She looked like a scared little girl. Fine, Danny said. But keep them away from me. He walked off toward the engine room. Grace watched him go, then led the cubs to the living quarters. She found blankets and made beds for them on the floor. She gave them food from the kitchen, not knowing if they could even eat human food. They could. They ate everything she gave them and looked at her for more. That night, Grace sat alone in the cockpit with the medallion in her hands. The symbols on its surface were beautiful but meant nothing to her. She connected her computer to the translation database and started scanning. It took 3 hours for the software to finish. When it did, Grace read the results on her screen and felt the world shift beneath her feet. The symbols were ancient Velthari script, a language that had not been spoken for thousands of years. The medallion was a religious artifact from a time before the Velthari had discovered space travel. And the words carved into it were part of a prophecy. Grace read the translation out loud in the empty cockpit. When the children of the storm face their darkest night, when the clans burn and the warriors fall, a stranger will come from beyond the black sky. She will not be of the people. She will carry no blade. But she will walk upon the battlefield turf, and the cubs will gather around her like she was fulfilling a prediction. She will be their shield in the darkness. She will lead them home. Grace read it again, then a third time. Her hands were shaking. She heard footsteps behind her. Danny stood in the doorway, his arms crossed. "Could not sleep," he said. "What are you doing?" Grace showed him the translation. She watched his face as he read it. She saw confusion, then disbelief, then something that looked almost like fear. "This is insane," he said. "I know. This was written 4,000 years ago, before they knew we existed, before they knew Earth existed. I know." Danny sat down heavily in the co-pilot chair. He rubbed his face with his hands. "Grace, this does not make any sense. How could they have known? How could anyone have known? I do not have an answer for that. Maybe the translation is wrong. Maybe, but look at them, Danny. Look at how they act around me. They follow me everywhere. They will not let me out of their sight. It is like they know something we do not." Danny was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "My brother was 22 when he died. He had just gotten engaged. He was going to name his first kid after our dad." He paused. "I have hated the Velthari for 5 years. I thought I would hate them forever. And now? Now I do not know. When I look at those cubs, I do not see enemies. I just see kids. Scared, lost kids who need help." He shook his head. "I still do not understand any of this, but I am not going to stand in your way." The next morning, Grace started learning the cubs' names. It was not easy. Velthari names were complex, with sounds that human throats struggled to make. But she tried, and the cubs seemed to appreciate the effort. The oldest was called Keth. He was almost as tall as Grace's waist and had dark gray fur with silver markings. He was protective of the others and always positioned himself between them and any potential threat. The youngest was Vora, the little female who had first taken Grace's hand on the dead ship. She was quiet and shy and liked to sit in Grace's lap while the others played. The others were Saul, Den, Marek, Tova, Rel, Nira, Bren, Josk, Hannah, and Len. Grace wrote their names on a piece of paper and studied them every night until she could remember them all. As the days passed, something strange happened. The cubs began to teach Grace things in return. They showed her Velthari gestures and sounds, the basic elements of their language. They taught her the songs their mothers had sung to them before the attack. They trusted her completely, in a way that Grace had never been trusted before. One evening, Keth approached Grace while she was working on the ship's engine. He stood beside her for a moment without speaking, then reached out and pressed his forehead against hers. It was a gesture Grace did not recognize. "What does that mean?" she asked. Keth pulled back and looked at her with his golden eyes. "It means you are family now. It means we belong to you and you belong to us, forever." Grace did not know what to say. She felt tears forming in her eyes, which was strange because she had not cried in years. She had thought that part of her was dead. "Keth," she said carefully, "I do not know if I can protect you. I am just one person with a broken ship. There are people out there who might try to hurt you. I cannot promise that everything will be okay." The young Velthari tilted his head. "The prophecy says you will lead us home. The prophecy is never wrong. But what if I fail? What if I cannot do what the prophecy says?" Keth smiled. It was the first time Grace had seen a Velthary smile, and it made him look very young. "You will not fail," he said. "We know this because we know you. You came for us when no one else did. You walked into a ship full of death and you saved us. A person who does that does not fail." Grace looked at the young cub standing before her. In his eyes, she saw absolute faith. It was terrifying and beautiful at the same time. She hugged him. It felt strange, hugging a Velthary. But also, somehow, it felt right. "Okay," she whispered. "I will try. I will do everything I can to get you home." In the engine room, hidden in the shadows, Danny watched them. He thought about his brother and about the war and about everything he had believed for the past 5 years. Then he turned away and went back to work. Some things, he was beginning to realize, were more complicated than hatred. The news spread faster than Grace expected. Someone at the depot station must have talked. Within a week, every criminal in the demilitarized zone knew about the 12 Velthary noble cubs aboard a human salvage vessel. The bounty was enormous. More money than Grace would see in 10 lifetimes. Danny came into the cockpit one morning with a grim look on his face. He handed Grace a data pad showing the bounty listing. "We need to run," he said. "Right now?" Grace looked at the number on the screen. Her stomach dropped. "Who posted this?" 3 different parties. A human crime syndicate wants to sell them to the highest bidder. A Velthary warlord named Goreth wants them for political leverage. And there is a group of mercenaries who do not care about politics at all. They just want the money. How long do we have? Based on the cum traffic I intercepted, maybe 6 hours before the first hunters arrive. Grace did not waste time. She woke the cubs and strapped them into the cargo bay. She powered up the driftwood's engines and pushed them as hard as they would go. The ship groaned and shook, but it flew. For 2 days they ran. Grace slept in shifts with Danny, one of them always at the controls. They jumped from system to system, using back routes that only experienced salvagers knew. The cubs stayed quiet and brave, sensing the danger without fully understanding it. On the 3rd day, the raiders caught up. Grace saw them on the scanner first. 3 ships, small and fast, closing in from behind. She tried to outrun them, but the driftwood was too slow. The raiders fired warning shots across her bow. "Human vessel," a voice crackled over the cum. "Stop your engines and prepare to be boarded. Give us the cubs and you can go free." Grace looked at Danny. Danny looked back at her. Neither of them spoke. Then Grace reached over and turned off the cum. "Hold on to something," she said. She flew the driftwood into the atmosphere of a nearby gas giant. The raiders followed. The ship bucked and screamed as the winds tore at its hull. Grace dove deeper, using the storms to hide them. The raiders could not keep up. Their smaller ships were thrown around by the turbulence. One of them spun out of control and vanished into the clouds below. Grace pulled up hard and burst out of the atmosphere on the other side of the planet. The 2 remaining raiders were far behind now, struggling to follow. She pushed the engines to maximum and jumped to hyperspace before they could catch up. They lost half their fuel in the escape. The engine was making new sounds, bad sounds, but they were alive. In the cargo bay, the cubs were scared but unhurt. Vora climbed into Grace's lap and pressed her face against her chest. Grace held her and stroked her fur and told her everything would be okay. She hoped she was not lying. The mercenaries came next. They were smarter than the raiders. They did not chase. They waited. Grace needed to refuel. There was no choice. She found a small station on the edge of human space and docked carefully. Danny stayed with the cubs while Grace went out to negotiate for fuel. The mercenaries were waiting in the refueling bay. There were 5 of them, all human, wearing combat armor and carrying plasma rifles. Their leader was a tall woman with a shaved head and cold eyes. "Grace Holloway," the woman said. "I am called Stone. I am here for the cubs." Grace did not have a weapon. She had left her pistol on the ship because she did not want to start trouble. That was a mistake she would not make again. "They are not for sale," Grace said. "Everything is for sale. The question is just the price." "Not them." "Not ever." Stone stepped closer. She was taller than Grace by half a foot. You do not understand the situation. Goreth wants those cubs. He is going to use them to unite the northern clans under his banner. If he succeeds, the ceasefire ends. The war starts again. Millions more will die. Grace felt cold. So you are doing this for peace? Is that what you tell yourself? I am doing this for money. The peace part is just a bonus. Stone raised her rifle. Last chance. Give us the cubs or we take them. Grace heard footsteps behind her. She turned and saw Danny coming down the ramp of the driftwood. He was carrying a plasma rifle of his own, and he did not look friendly. 5 against 2, Danny said. I have had worse odds. Stone laughed. You are both going to die for a bunch of alien kids? That is the hill you want to die on? They are just children, Grace said. I do not care whose children they are. I am not going to let you hurt them. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Stone sighed and lowered her rifle. You know what? This job is not worth the trouble. Goreth can find his own cubs. She turned and walked away. Her mercenaries followed. Grace watched them go, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. When they were gone, Danny put his hand on her shoulder. That was close. Too close. We need to keep moving. They refueled and left the station within the hour. But Grace knew their luck would not hold forever. Sooner or later, someone would come who could not be scared away. That someone came 3 days later. It was a Velthari warship, huge and black, bristling with weapons. It appeared out of hyperspace right in front of them, blocking their path. There was no way to run. There was no way to fight. A voice came over the comm, deep and commanding. Human vessel, I am Goreth of the Northern Clans. You have something that belongs to me. Prepare to be boarded. Grace looked at the cubs. They were huddled together in the cargo bay, their eyes wide with fear. Keth stood in front of the others, his small fists clenched, trying to be brave. Stay here, Grace told them. No matter what happens, stay here. She walked to the airlock and waited. The Velthari boarding party came through moments later. There were 6 warriors, each one massive and armed with blades that hummed with energy. Behind them came Goreth himself. He was the biggest Velthari Grace had ever seen. His fur was pure black and his eyes burned with cold ambition. He looked at Grace like she was an insect. Where are the cubs? He demanded, safe, away from you. Goreth laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. You are brave for a human. Stupid, but brave. Do you know who I am? Do you know what I can do? I know you want to use children as pawns in your political games. That tells me everything I need to know about you? The warlord's eyes narrowed. He raised one massive hand, and Grace prepared to die. Then Keth appeared in the doorway behind her. Goreth, the young cub said, his voice shaking but clear. I am Keth, son of Velar, heir to the Southern Fire Clan. These cubs are under my protection and the protection of the Prophecy Walker. Goreth froze. His warriors froze. They all stared at the small cub like he had just spoken the secret name of the universe. The Prophecy Walker? Goreth whispered. Keth pointed at Grace. She found us in the darkness. She carried us through fire. She walks the battlefield turf and we gather around her. Just like the ancient word said. Grace did not understand what was happening. But she saw something change in Goreth's face. The cold ambition was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Fear? Wonder? She could not tell. Goreth stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he lowered his hand. The prophecy, he said softly. I thought it was just a story. All stories are true, Keth said. You taught me that yourself, Uncle. Uncle. Grace filed that information away for later. Goreth stood there in silence. His warriors waited, confused. Then the warlord turned and walked back toward the airlock. Let them go, he said to his warriors. We will not interfere with the prophecy. He paused at the door and looked back at Grace. If you truly are the one the ancients spoke of, then you must complete the journey. Take them home. Take them to Velthari Prime. Then he was gone. The warship pulled away and vanished into hyperspace. Leaving the driftwood alone among the stars, Grace stood there, breathing hard, trying to understand what had just happened. Keth walked up beside her and took her hand. "I told you," he said quietly. "You will not fail." Grace looked down at the young cub. She did not know if the prophecy was real. She did not know if any of this made sense. But she knew one thing for certain. She was going to get these children home, no matter what it took. Valkyrie Prime was beautiful in a way that made Grace's chest hurt. She had never seen a planet like it. The sky was purple and gold, painted by the light of 3 distant suns. Vast plains of silver grass stretched to the horizon, broken by mountains so tall their peaks vanished into the clouds. Rivers of clear blue water wound through valleys that looked like they had been carved by the hands of gods. Grace stood at the cockpit window and stared. Behind her, the cubs pressed against the glass, their eyes shining with joy and relief. They were home. After everything they had been through, they were finally home. "It is beautiful," Danny said softly. He stood beside Grace, his face unreadable. "I spent 11 years fighting these people, and I never once stopped to wonder what their home looked like." "Neither did I," Grace admitted. The cum crackled. A deep voice spoke in Velthari, then switched to human language. "Unknown vessel, you have entered Velthari sovereign space. Identify yourself immediately or you will be destroyed." Grace took a deep breath. This was the moment she had been dreading. She was a human in Velthari territory. By all rights, they should arrest her. Kill her, maybe. The ceasefire was fragile, and what she had done could be seen as an act of war. "This is Grace Holloway," she said into the cum. "I am a human salvager. I am carrying 12 Velthari cubs from the noble clans. Their transport was attacked in the demilitarized zone. I rescued them and brought them here." Silence. Long, terrible silence. Then the voice returned, different now. Softer. "Did you say 12 cubs? From the noble clans?" "Yes, they are safe. They are unharmed." More silence. Grace could hear voices in the background speaking rapidly in Velthari. She caught words here and there. "Prophecy. Impossible. The battlefield turf." Finally the voice came back. "Human vessel, you are to proceed to the capital city. Do not deviate from the course we send you. An escort will guide you down." 2 Velthari fighter craft appeared on either side of the driftwood. They were sleek and deadly, nothing like the ugly patchwork ship Grace flew. But they did not fire. They simply guided her down through the atmosphere toward the sprawling city below. The capital was called Tharval. It was ancient beyond imagining, built from white stone that gleamed in the triple sunlight. Towers rose into the sky like reaching fingers. Bridges connected buildings hundreds of feet above the ground. Millions of Velthari lived here, and as Grace's ship descended, she saw thousands of them stopping to stare upward. They landed in a courtyard. Outside, a massive structure that Grace guessed was some kind of government building or temple. The courtyard was empty except for a single row of Velthari warriors in ceremonial armor. Grace opened the airlock. She looked at Danny, then at the cubs. "Stay close to me," she said. "Whatever happens, stay close." She stepped out onto Velthari soil. Her boots pressed into ground that had never felt human footsteps. The air smelled strange, like flowers and electricity. The gravity was slightly heavier than Earth standard, making her feel like she was carrying extra weight on her shoulders. The warriors did not move. They just watched her with those golden eyes. Then the cubs emerged behind her. 12 young Velthari walking down the ramp of a human ship. They gathered around Grace like they had done since the first day she found them. Like she was the center of their universe. A door opened in the great building. A procession of Velthari emerged, dressed in robes of gold and silver. At their head walked the oldest Velthari Grace had ever seen. His fur was pure white, and he moved slowly, leaning on a staff carved from some kind of bone. This was Grandmaster Sorik, leader of the High Council. Grace knew his name from the war. He had been the one who finally agreed to the ceasefire. Some humans called him wise. Others called him weak. Looking at him now, Grace thought he just looked tired. Sorik stopped a few feet away from Grace. He studied her face for a long moment. Then his gaze dropped to the medallion hanging around her neck. "Where did you get that?" he asked. His voice was like gravel scraping against stone. "An elder gave it to me. On the ship where I found the cubs." She said it would explain. Sorek reached out and took the medallion in his hands. He turned it over, reading the ancient words carved into its surface. His eyes grew wide. "Do you know what this says?" he asked. I had it translated. "It talks about a prophecy. Someone who would come from beyond the stars and protect the children of the storm." Sorek looked at her. Then he looked at the cubs gathered around her. Then he looked back at her. "4,000 years ago," he said slowly, "our ancestors wrote those words. They did not know about humans. They did not know about Earth. They did not know that intelligent life existed anywhere except our own world. And yet they described you perfectly. A stranger from beyond the black sky. One who carries no blade but protects nonetheless." Grace did not know what to say. She had never been good with words, especially not in moments like this. Sorek turned to address the gathered crowd. Thousands of Velthari had filled the courtyard now, watching in silence. He spoke in their language, his voice carrying across the open space. Grace did not understand the words, but she understood the reaction. The Velthari began to kneel. One by one, row by row, they lowered themselves to the ground. Warriors who had killed humans in battle. Nobles who had lost family to human weapons. Priests and merchants and children. All of them kneeling before this small human woman who had done nothing more than protect children who needed protecting. Sorek turned back to Grace, slowly. Painfully he lowered himself to his knees. "For 4,000 years, we have waited," he said. "For 4,000 years, we have wondered if the prophecy was true or just a story told to comfort the dying. Now we know. You are real. You came for our children when no one else would. You carried them through darkness and fire. You walked onto the battlefield turf and became their shield." Grace felt tears streaming down her face. She did not try to stop them. "I just did what was right," she said. "Anyone would have done the same." Sorek shook his head. "No, not anyone. Many would have left them to die. Many would have sold them to the highest bidder. But you chose a different path. You chose mercy. You chose love. And that Grace Holloway is why the prophecy chose you." He rose to his feet and took both of Grace's hands in his. "On behalf of the Velthari people, on behalf of every clan and every family and every child yet to be born, I thank you. Your name will be remembered for as long as our people exist. Your story will be taught in every school and sung in every temple. You came to us as a stranger, but you leave as family." The crowd rose and began to cheer. The sound was overwhelming, a wave of noise that seemed to shake the very stones of the city. The cubs pressed closer to Grace, their faces bright with joy. Danny stood at the bottom of the ramp, watching. His face was wet with tears. Grace caught his eye and he nodded slowly. Whatever hatred he had carried for the Velthari, whatever anger had burned in his heart for 5 years, it was gone now. Washed away by something bigger than either of them. That night, there was a feast in Grace's honor. She sat at the high table with Sorek and the other council members. The cubs sat beside her, eating and laughing like children should. Music played, strange and beautiful. Velthari danced in ways that Grace had never seen. She did not understand most of what was happening. She did not speak the language or know the customs. But she understood the feeling behind it all: gratitude, relief, hope. For the first time in 11 years, humans and Velthari sat together in peace. Not because of treaties or politics or fear of mutual destruction, but because one woman had chosen to save 12 children. Grace looked around the great hall at all the golden eyes watching her. She thought about the war and all the death and all the hatred. She thought about how easy it would have been to fly away from that crashed ship and pretend she had never seen it. She was glad she had not. Maybe. She thought this was how peace really happened. Not with big speeches and signed papers, but with small acts of kindness, one at a time. Until the world changed without anyone noticing. She raised her glass and drank to the future. Grace stayed on Velthari Prime for 30 days. It was not her choice. Every time she tried to leave, someone needed to thank her or honor her or give her another gift. The Velthari were generous to a fault, and they seemed determined to shower her with more praise than any one person could handle. They offered her land. Vast estates in the silver grass plains, big enough to hold a small city. She refused. They offered her titles and positions on the High Council. She refused those too. They offered her warriors to serve as her personal guard for the rest of her life. She refused again. She was not built for thrones or temples. She was a salvager, a medic, a woman who had spent her whole life running from one broken thing to another. The idea of staying in one place and being worshipped made her skin crawl, but she could not leave without saying goodbye. On her last night, the cubs gathered in her quarters. It was a beautiful room in one of the towers, with windows that looked out over the entire city. The triple moons of Velthari Prime hung low in the purple sky, casting silver light across everything. The cubs had changed in the past month. They looked healthier now, their fur shining, their eyes bright. They had families again. The noble clans had claimed them, given them homes and education and all the things that children needed. But they still came to see Grace every day. They still followed her around like she was the center of their universe. Tonight was different. Tonight they knew she was leaving. Keth stood in front of the others. He had grown taller in the past month, his shoulders broader. He was becoming a young man, though he still had the face of a child. "We know you must go," he said. "We have always known. The prophecy said you would lead us home, not stay with us forever." Grace sat down on the edge of her bed so she was closer to their height. "I wish I could stay. Part of me wants to. But my place is out there, among the stars. There are other people who need help. Other broken things that need fixing." "We understand," Vora said. She was holding a small object in her hands, wrapped in cloth. "But before you go, we want to give you something." She stepped forward and placed the object in Grace's hands. Grace unwrapped it carefully. It was a carving made from the same white stone as the buildings of Tharval. The carving showed a human woman standing in the center of a group of Velthari cubs. The detail was incredible. Grace could see her own face in the tiny figure, her own expression of gentle determination. "We made it together," Keth said. "All 12 of us. It took many nights, but we wanted it to be perfect." "So you would never forget us?" Grace's throat felt tight. She had to swallow hard before she could speak. "I could never forget you. Not in a million years." One by one, the cubs came forward. Each of them pressed their forehead against hers, the gesture of eternal bond that Keth had taught her. Each of them whispered words in Velthari that Grace had learned to understand. Forever family. When the last cub had finished, Grace stood up and looked at them all. These children who had been her responsibility, her burden, her joy. These small lives that she had carried through darkness and fire. "You are going to do amazing things," she said. "I know it. All of you are going to grow up and lead your clans and make this world better than you found it. And when you do, I want you to remember something." She knelt down so she could look into their eyes. "Remember that kindness matters. Remember that the universe is full of people who need help, and that it costs nothing to offer a hand. Remember that enemies can become friends and strangers can become family. And remember that one person can change everything if they just have the courage to try." Keth nodded solemnly. "We will remember. We will teach our children, and they will teach theirs. For 1,000 generations, the Velthari will tell the story of Grace Holloway, the human who walked onto the battlefield turf and chose mercy over fear." Grace smiled and ruffled his fur. "Just take care of each other, kid. That is all I ask." She left the tower and walked through the city one last time. The streets were quiet now, most of the population asleep. But here and there, Velthari stopped to bow their heads as she passed. Some of them whispered her name like a prayer. Danny was waiting at the driftwood. He had the engines warmed up and a course plotted back to human space. A cup of coffee sat on the console, still steaming. "Ready?" he asked. Grace looked back at the city one last time. The towers caught the moonlight and glowed like white fire. Somewhere in there, 12 cubs were sleeping, dreaming of futures that would not have been possible without her. "Ready?" she said. The driftwood lifted off from the courtyard and rose into the purple sky. Grace watched Valkyrie Prime grow smaller through the cockpit window until it was just another star among millions. "The news feeds are going crazy," Danny said. "What you did, what happened here, everyone is talking about it. The diplomats are meeting again. Real meetings this time, not just posturing. They are actually talking about peace." "Good," Grace said. "That is good. Some people are calling you a hero. Others are calling you a traitor for helping the enemy. A few are saying you made the whole thing up." Grace shrugged. "People can say whatever they want. I know what happened." "You know what happened?" "The Cubs know. That is enough for me." Danny was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that surprised her. "I forgive them." Grace looked at him. "What? The Valkyrie?" "For my brother. For the war. For everything." He stared out at the stars, his face calm in a way she had never seen before. "I spent 5 years carrying that hate around like a stone in my chest. It was killing me, and I did not even know it. But watching you with those cubs, watching what happened on Valkyrie Prime, something changed. I do not want to hate anymore. I am tired of it." Grace reached over and put her hand on his shoulder. "Your brother would be proud of you. Maybe, I hope so." The driftwood jumped to hyperspace. The stars stretched into lines and then vanished. Replaced by the swirling blue tunnel of faster-than-light travel, Grace leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. She was tired in a way that sleep could not fix. The kind of tired that came from carrying something heavy for a very long time and finally putting it down. She thought about the prophecy. 4,000 years ago, someone had written words that described her perfectly. Someone had looked into the future and seen her walking onto the battlefield turf with 12 cubs gathered around her. How was that possible? How could anyone know? She did not have an answer. Maybe she never would. But she had decided that it did not matter. Whether the prophecy was real magic or just incredible coincidence, the result was the same. 12 children were safe. 2 peoples who had been at war were talking about peace. And Grace Holloway was flying through the stars with a clean conscience for the first time in years. The medallion still hung around her neck. She would keep it forever, she decided. A reminder of what had happened and what she had learned. Anyone could make a difference. Anyone could change the world. You did not need an army or a throne or special powers. You just needed to see someone who needed help and choose to help them. That was it. That was the whole secret. Grace opened her eyes and looked at the hyperspace tunnel rushing past the window. Somewhere out there, more people needed help. More broken things needed fixing. More children needed someone to believe in them. She smiled. "Hey, Danny," she said. "When we get back to human space, I want to look for more salvage jobs. The more dangerous ones, the ones that take us to places no one else wants to go." Danny raised an eyebrow. "Any particular reason?" "Because that is where people need us most. That is where we can do the most good." He nodded slowly. "Sounds good to me." The driftwood flew on through the endless dark, carrying 2 humans who had found something worth living for. Behind them, in a city of white stone on a world with purple skies, 12 young Valkyrie looked up at the same stars and smiled. The prophecy had been fulfilled. But the story, they knew, was just beginning, and somewhere, somehow, the universe felt a little bit kinder than it had the day before.